We experienced coast-watched aircraft as we then were heading north. They flew over regularly, and also they picked us up on their radar and asked us where we're going, port of origin, port of destination. And I didn't feel intimidated by them. I thought it was good to know that someone was around, and we only had a VHF radio, but I also had mobile phones, and from time to time, even down the west coast of Western Australia, we could, as we went past a settlement, you could get a mobile phone signal and the computer would come out and you could send emails, and we actually sent 100 pages of emails home of our journey, and they've been circulating around everywhere of some of our experiences. This is one great experience in Escape River. We were going in and the wind was blowing about 20 knots, and we were dodging the pearl farms. We come across pearl farms, and we were going a little bit close to towards the land, and we just touched, and the tide was running out, and with about 10 minutes the tide had dropped, say 100 millimetres, and of course we were aground. The tide was 2.6 metres, and that night, next morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was going to be about 2.6. So as the tide came in and the boat came up and almost floated free, we had 20 knots of wind and the waves breaking on the side of the boat and thumping, but we had the anchors out and it was secure. And so we set it out for 24 hours, and the next morning we were in readiness, and with the motors just ticking over, we put a buoy down there, a little gutter, so that if we did float off, we could have this little extra bit of 100 millimetres of water, and we then slowly left, and we gave it full power, and we're out. So one person who watches that depth gauge is Paula. We don't want another Escape River, but there was no damage, floated off. We were able to give the boat a bit of a scrub on the side, but keeping an eye on the crocodiles. Past another significant landmark is the Cape York Peninsula, and then we on to Thursday Island and Horn Island. And that was interesting visiting Thursday Island. It's only a very small island. You can drive around it in 10 minutes. From Thursday Island, we then set course to go across the Gulf of Carpentaria, and that journey took us 3.5 days, and we've had pretty well ideal weather conditions. We've heard of other people having horrific conditions, but we just cruised across the Gulf pretty well in one straight line. The yellow indicates the wind direction, the blue was the current, the red is the heading, and the green is where you're actually going. So 3.5 days across the Gulf, and we had, this is a shot earlier, but we had the crew relaxing a bit here, and with six on board, it was good. We could have reasonable watches and get plenty of sleep. In the Gove, we managed to get to a washing machine, and you know, with 6 of us, with 3.5 weeks, a bit of washing was undertaken, and we had an interesting trip around Gove and around Nhulunbuy with an Iraqi taxi driver who we were with them for a couple of hours and showed us all the sights of Nhulunbuy and Gove. And there were plenty of boats anchored in Gove. Some people were sitting out the cyclone season in Gove, but I don't think it would be very desirable to sit out the cyclone season in Gove. As we then moved on, we were going across, and the awning that extends out from you can extend it out as you're sailing along, and gives you plenty of shade. And that's one aspect that we found is superb, is that you didn't get sunburnt and you weren't exhausted from the heat, and plenty of protection. And even coming across the bight, we dropped the awning at the back of the cabin, and then the wind and the rain just was kept out. Like today, we're getting a bit of rain here, but it was well protected and very comfortable, even with roaring across the bight with some 30 knots of wind plus. As we then continued on through the Gagarin Straits, and this is what they call a hole in the wall. The length of the channel is 1.2 kilometres and about 70 metres wide. It can run through there at about 12 knots, and we went through with an assistance of 6 knots. Very turbulent. It was even turbulent at 6 knots. Magnificent rock structure. But as we were exiting, there was this osprey. He was determined to get my wind indicator. But I got out the horn and I blew it, and he went off. So I think there might be a few wind indicators in the osprey nests around the area there. Now, I'm not sure who's on watch here, but life's pretty good. And of course there are other essential jobs to do, and one of them is unblocking the toilet, but I find everything on the Seawind is simple. This is where you actually pump it out from the holding tank. It holds about 130 litres, and from time to time I get blocked, so I just get the pump from the tender and just hook it up and pump it back, and it blows it back and it just frees it. So it's quite a simple operation. And that's the advantage of the boat, I find, is everything's quite simple. When you know, outboard, you can pull them out. And of course this is the crew that's off watch. We then continue on from Gove through those islands in the north, but as we're approaching Darwin, we heard there were squalls around Darwin, and we thought, well, Darwin, you know, it's quite, you know, 360 degrees around Darwin, we may get a squall. But 2 o'clock in the morning, Paula was saying, oh, she's saying nice things about the wind, and as the breeze came in from the stern, it was coming in a couple of knots because we had hardly any wind at 3 in the morning. And then all of a sudden, within a few minutes, it was 45 knots. And this is the track we photographed off the chart, and you can see that the track we followed, the wind just took us, we just went in a straight line, and I'm not sure what speed we were doing, but I was just on steering and I was looking ahead. All the waves were flat because of the water, all the rain on the waves and the wind. It was just flat sea, and the spray from the bow was just being reflected in the green navigation light. And we actually ended up doing this neat little triangle and back where we started, and then continued on our journey to Darwin. Unfortunately, the jib did rip, and we had to get that repaired in Darwin. This is entering the lock into Cullen Bay. We stayed there for 3 days now. In this journey around Australia, I had people flying in and flying out to meet me, and they all had booked their flights and holidays, and John and the crew left me at Darwin, and a friend from Traralgon and his son joined us at Darwin, and we continued on through the Kimberley. So I was keeping my timetable, and this is the sail that we had to get repaired, but the sailmaker was very hospitable and did a quick repair for us. And the wind indicator was a little loose, so I tripped up the mast just to check it out, and it was even pretty hot there at 10 o'clock in the morning up the top of the mast. We then left Darwin and then across Bonaparte Gulf, known as Blown Apart Gulf, and we took about a couple of days to get across there, I think, for them, 2 days to get across there, and then into the King George River. We were having a little trouble finding the actual entrance into the river, so we decided we would anchor and go and find it in the tender, because we didn't want another escape river. So we found the entrance, and then up the King George River, and the magnificent scenery, and the photos really don't do it justice in as much as you've got to be there to see it. And whilst I had a fairly quick trip through the Kimberleys, you get an appreciation. You can see it, you can spend weeks there, but you've got to keep in mind, do you want to sit out a wet season and cyclone season, and you can always go back. We then continued on into Parry Harbour. And we're coming in, and we're having fairly long days. We came into Parry Harbour at 10 o'clock at night, and as we're entering into the harbour, I could see a sandy beach and some trees, and a clear sandy beach, and a few more trees, and I was heading straight for this white sandy beach. And all of a sudden, in front of me, in a little bit of moonlight, was this yacht. And I thought, what's a yacht doing here without an anchor light? Turned to starboard and went around, and it was one of the only 4 yachts we saw we'd seen it out on the water, from Darwin to Perth, only saw 4 yachts. So the motto of this is, whenever you're anchored, no matter how remote it is, you always put your anchor light on. Yeah. And this was a large baobab tree at Parry Harbour. We took advantage of getting in and getting some there before sunset and visiting some of the islands, and this is an osprey nest that's been used probably many, many years.